I'm good. How are you?
Good. We have actually there's like 4 special guests today. I've got one of mine, actually two of mine. You've got one of yours, so we've got all kinds of guests in here today.
Yes. This is Anthony. He's my 13-month-old.
Hi, Anthony. And it's perfect because today I am super excited. You have a lot of different things in your background. This is Brittney, by the way. I totally forgot to introduce you. I'm too busy like explaining away all of our children. But Brittney, a little bit. I was excited to find out like you're a lactation consultant with a nutrition background, but tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you know about postpartum phase.
So that's right. I am an international board certified lactation consultant. I actually started out as a nutritionist for the WIC program and then working with infants, women, and children up to the age of 5 for nutrition. Got asked a lot of breastfeeding questions, got super interested in lactation, borderline obsessed, and then sat for the international board exam and then went into the hospital system, worked with the NICU. I was working in a high-level NICU for a while, and then ended up at a hospital where I was working in L&D, postpartum, and outpatient. So I would literally see you before you had your baby, up until as long as you needed me after you had your baby. So postpartum can be a whole different ball game than pregnancy, and I used to call my chair in my office the chair of tears because that's a good name for what happens postpartum. Lots of tears for lots of different reasons, not just feeding issues.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to talk to you today. Primarily, like my background is fitness, so I'm primarily interested in, because it's one of the things that I've noticed postpartum is you have this postural change.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see even right now I'm wearing a baby, and it takes a lot of my like reminding myself constantly to sit up. What have you seen as far as, especially breastfeeding, that posture change, and how does that impact a female's body physically?
So a lot of moms will end up with kind of a buffalo hump from leaning forward. And just like you explained in your video for this week, we tend to lean forward with our bellies. And then we have our baby and we lean over, whether we're leaning over a crib or we're leaning over to change or we're leaning over to feed or pump or literally everything you do, you're leaning over. And then you could literally reform your back to having a hump because your head is so far forward. And I've even struggled with this, even though I know.
Right.
I know what you're not supposed to do. And so with breastfeeding, there are definitely some different tips that I give moms for having the correct posture while feeding so that you can do a little bit to help from having the posture change to where you don't have to rehabilitate it like I am now.
Yes. Yeah. And that, I think that's like, I'm super excited about your tips, but I think you hit on something really big is a lot of people wait until there's some kind of issue or pain. And that's something that I'm really, it's totally fine. There's going to be.
Yeah, baby. Look. Look.
There's a little baby in here too. Sometimes that's something.
Do you see that baby? Oh my goodness. Look at this baby. See?
Oh, that's exciting. Like the idea of, hey, let's get on this before we have an issue. Like I even say, spend 2 weeks bonding.
Yeah.
Start work, because I think that's important. And I'm sure you as a lactation consultant understand, like, don't jump on trying to get fit. Let's like get that bonding down.
Right.
Start right away with like just engagement, not doing crazy physical stuff, but engagement. And then of course you have some wonderful tips that I'm dying to hear about how we can practice good posture so that our core starts getting stronger as soon as it starts coming back together like it should.
Right. Right. And I mean, we do have a couple things working against us because of the relaxin that's still being released from breastfeeding. And that'll actually stay in your system about up to 4 months after you stop breastfeeding. And so you have that kind of working against you of keeping that abdominal from being pulled back together. And so
that's cool. I really like that you said that. You said up to 4 months until you stop breastfeeding, or after you stop breastfeeding?
After you stop breastfeeding. So once you've weaned, 4 months after that, I mean, you still have that relaxin in your system.
So for people, I guess people that aren't familiar with, make sure I'm saying this correctly, the relaxin is that hormone that makes your ligaments loose, and
yes,
it allows you to have the baby. It helps.
Yeah.
But I think that's interesting because there's a lot of moms, for instance, I breastfed until I was 4 months pregnant with this one. So like I've, been either pregnant or breastfeeding since, what was it?
Years.
July of 2016?
Yeah, years.
January of 2020, like we're going on. And I think that a lot of moms, they actually kind of have, and maybe this is going somewhere that you want to go, they have this idea that, because we say breastfeeding promotes, that weight loss, it helps you lose some weight, but there are some things that breastfeeding, like relaxin, keeps in our system and does make it sometimes a little more difficult. So I think some of the things that moms made these assumptions about breastfeeding, they forget about the hormones that are still in your system, and that, you can do all you want, but that's why I say postpartum isn't as soon as you have the baby. Postpartum can be years and years and years and years. And if you have all these things that have worked against you, postpartum could just be 60 years after you've had a kid. I mean,
because you never fixed it.
Right, exactly. So I love that you brought that up, because I think that's super intriguing and interesting, and something that a lot of moms don't think about relaxin when they think about the hormones and the things that are associated with breastfeeding.
Right. And then if you are a lucky person that loses weight while breastfeeding, which some are not, and that is normal.
You eat a lot while you're breastfeeding too.
Well, and some women are really sensitive to prolactin and actually will hold on to fat because of it. And so, you have that, you lose the weight, and then you have a pooch because your body's not wanting to build that muscle and pull it back together yet. And so that's why posture is so important, so you're not contributing to even more dysfunction.
And I know it sounds like we're being Debbie Downer, but I think for a lot of people who haven't been educated in that, it can kind of help you when you're doing all this work and you're like, I don't see like the quote unquote results. That's why I like to teach core function. Like, is your core functioning correctly? That's very body positive. We don't need to focus so much on the size of the waist, because that is so variable. Even like normal females pre-child, like think about the hormone fluctuations there. Variable.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear more about the posture tips you have. That's helpful for you.
So I would say that I have two positions that are my favorite for posture. The first one that I would recommend for especially newborn phase and whenever moms are learning would be a cross cradle position, which is where the baby is across and you have your hand across the baby, okay? And then you're holding the breast with the other hand. Now, when you do this position, I would recommend sitting in a high back chair, okay, with a breastfeeding pillow of some sort. It doesn't have to be a breastfeeding pillow, depending on your budget. My personal favorite would be the My Breast Friend pillow because it has a lumbar support and it attaches to you. And so it's less likely to like fall and slip off.
Right.
And then whatever pillow you're using underneath the baby, add another one. So 2 pillows, your breastfeeding pillow and a pillow underneath, so that they stay high enough. Because your baby is going to naturally drop down because of gravity, and it's going to make you slouch, okay? So the higher you have the baby, the less likely you are to lean forward, okay? And then just to help even more from keeping you from leaning forward, I would put a stool in front of you. I've seen people turn a chair around to put their feet on the chair and getting those knees above your hips so that now you're leaning back. You've got the baby high, okay, and you're leaning back so that you can't lean forward. You
I
can't
love it.
slouch down. You have to lean back, and that keeps everything nice and aligned in your back so you're not curving over, and it'll help keeping those shoulders back as well. So that's my number one position that I would say for latch, and it's not an advanced position. It's very easy for someone in the beginner phase to do. And then as you're nursing and you're getting more comfortable with holding and latching, then you can transition to something called a laid back position or a biological nurturing position. And that's more where you're laying on a couch or you're in a bed and you're leaning all the way back, and you put a pillow underneath your back, and your baby is more on top of you, like this, or like this, across. So now you still can't lean forward and slouch, and it's actually a very comfortable position for the baby to latch in. But I do say it's more of an advanced position because you're kind of funky with your hands in the beginning, and their heads are bobbing, and there's like no neck muscle, so they're just flipping and flopping. So I would say in the beginning, for that first 6 weeks, I would be doing more of the cross cradle sitting, so you can sit nice and straight up and lean back a little bit.
That is, I'm just thinking back like, oh my gosh, that is so smart. The stool under the feet. I even had a lactation consultant, and that never, I guess because it never came up really, like there was only certain things that came up. But oh my gosh, that would have been so great. And it's so funny you talked about the hand, because I developed, and I don't know, this might be a normal thing, but I developed like symptoms of carpal tunnel with my first. And because I think I was trying to like manipulate her head and manipulate my breast, and like I was just like put them together. Whereas all of that lifting would have been so nice. I had pillow, but having that additional pillow and the stool underneath, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and the pillow with another pillow underneath it to stay high.
Yeah. Oh, that's so brilliant. But yeah, and I like though when you get to the point where you can lay back.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole nother ball game.
Who am I talking to? He's looking at me like, who are you talking to?
He loves this. He's like part of the interview. He's also a great model. I'm glad you had him to demonstrate.
I know. I'm used to just, before I had a baby, it was just like hands or like a stuffed animal, you know, and now I'm like, wait, I've got my baby. Let me.
Yeah. You've done it all before. And it's like, I'm ready, mama. Nice. So on top of those, were those all the tips? I'm sorry, did I go over?
Yeah, as far as positioning, I would say yes. Those would be the two that I would recommend for positioning. Now, you could do a football. It's a little bit harder to keep everything so straight up because the baby's on the side, and a lot of moms will lean over. So if you like feeding in football position, you could do that. You just want to make sure you're still leaning back in a high back chair with the knees above the hips specifically, so everything's kind of shifting back. You can do a football in that position as well.
Very cool. Okay, great posture tips. What did you have other tips, or is it just the posture, or?
I
don't remember.
As far as
I have our kids all around, we get lost easily.
Oh, I know. I would say just I always still, because you're feeding so much in the beginning, take time to whenever, I know they say like nap when your baby's nap, but sometimes that's just not, it's more of like shower.
Exactly.
Please. But I always tried to do some like cat cows.
Okay, yeah.
And then some bridges as well, getting on my back and lifting my pelvis up to kind of stretch out my back.
Yeah.
Just because you sit so much when you're nursing, to kind of stretch things out. And then you also have the option of nursing in a wrap when you're standing.
Yes.
If you like the structural carriers, you can nurse in one like that. And if you have the one with the back support in it, you can stand straight up and nurse, and that can help with your posture as well. That's harder in the beginning, but as they get older, definitely something to change it up if you're feeling that you're having back problems.
Awesome. And they get, I mean, for if there are any new moms watching this, they also get better. If you're breastfeeding, they also get better at breastfeeding. And so that's a great day when they get a little bit better, because you can do some of those things you're talking about, like nurse in a wrap. And
yes, which in the beginning, do not be discouraged. No one's nursing in a wrap. No one's nursing without support. Like, you see people nursing in public, those are not 2-week-olds.
no.
Those are like 4 and 5-month-olds.
And
maybe.
And maybe not the first time mom. Like my first experience ever breastfeeding in public, I was like under a shroud and like trying all this stuff with my little one. But then like you saw the first video with my second kid at 7 weeks, it was like, okay, I'm like talking to people. Oh, she's a breastfeed. Okay. So yeah, you're right. It's probably not a tiny child. It's probably not a first time mom. But since you are a lactation consultant, and I mean, I know plenty of people that have not breastfed, but there are some benefits of breastfeeding for people who are still trying to make the decision or who have decided to breastfeed for the core, right? Like there are some benefits to kind of getting, I hate to say your body back, I hate that, but that's kind of what we're familiar with the term.
So I would say the one that kind of goes for anyone that's breastfeeding is the shrinking of the uterus back to size. That would be the number one thing I would say. When you breastfeed, you release oxytocin, and that causes contractions. And so they're painful. If you felt these in the hospital, if you did any nursing, and the more babies you have, the more they hurt.
Yeah, that was a surprise second time around. I was like,
they hurt. But it's just that the uterus contracting and shrinking back to size, it actually keeps you from bleeding out, because you're bleeding normally the way you're supposed to, and that contraction forces out more of the bleeding and not like a hemorrhage format. But that's something that can help shrink that core down. Yeah, honey, I know. You're being very sweet. You're a very sweet boy. And so I would say that would be the number one thing. And then another thing that's more indirect is if you nurse, eventually, not in the beginning, you will have more time because you're not washing bottles and doing other things like that to do some of these exercises that we talk about. You'll just have a little bit more time to do those. Not in the beginning, because you kind of are nursing constantly in the beginning, but once you get out of that 6-week stage and you're cleared for stuff, you have less of the work that you need to be doing whenever they are doing naps, that you can start doing some exercise and instead of having to wash bottles.
And that 6 weeks, it feels so long, but it doesn't. It's such a tiny phase. And looking back, you're like, man, that was just such a blip on the radar. But you know, it does feel like a long time. And I would say all the exercises that you're talking about that I do right now, this is how we met. We met in a course that I'm hosting for moms. But it's okay if you don't get to those in the first 6 weeks. Like,
oh yeah,
especially
I didn't do any of that in the first 6 weeks except walk.
Right. And that too, and there's kind of two parts to this. One is you don't have to wait till 6 weeks to do something like the cat and the cow and to walk around. There's a lot of people who, unless, I mean, it depends on what your doctor's told you, but it's just like kind of a general scenario. But then there's also like, I didn't even start this whole course that I'm creating. I wanted to do along with everyone, but it wasn't until my child was 7 weeks. So I haven't done all of that in 7 weeks, which is okay. Your body,
that's totally okay.
Will bounce back. And then I think this goes back, you know, the women who are breastfeeding, like they have that benefit of having the lower levels of hormone in the beginning.
Yeah.
There's kind of both sides of the story there, because I don't want to be discouraging to anyone.
No, of course not.
Moms, we tend to want to encourage other moms. That is just how we are. And you have so I want to know any other little tips or tricks up your sleeve or anything else, because this has been super informative so far.
I mean, I would say, take care of yourself so that you can take care of your baby. I mean, one thing, I struggled with postpartum depression. And so, and thankfully I was in the field, working in the field, so I knew the signs and symptoms. But if you don't feel like doing the exercises or don't feel like, you know, getting out and take a walk, that's okay. And you're normal, especially if you were super physical before. It's okay if you don't feel like doing those things. It doesn't mean something is wrong with you. Your whole life just changed, whether you're adding another baby in or a new one. And you're going to go through an identity process of trying to figure out who you want to be now with your baby. And that might not be going to the gym for an hour every day, 7 days a week. You know, exercise is going to look different for you. Self-care is going to look different for you. But ultimately, your mental health is very important. And whether you're struggling with feeding issues or sleep issues, you are not alone. And to look for your mom's support through other moms, because we need each other. There's a reason they say it takes a village.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm so glad we got to chat today. Everything you said, I love. We went places I wasn't sure we would go. Still is kind of encouraging even to me, that idea of the hormones. Like, I think there's a lot of people who need to hear that. So maybe you watched today because you heard she was a lactation consultant, but I hope you got some really good information about the hormones. You're saying with your body, it's not going to be the same. I think we talked about this idea of a mom bod, and that doesn't mean you're any smaller or bigger. Maybe you're the exact same, but things have changed in that moment, and we have to be kind to ourselves as we go through this. And
yes,
even, like we said before, if you are years and years postpartum, but you've never addressed any of those issues, then now's the time. Now's the time to get your quote unquote body back, get your core function back. It sure is.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to end this, and you have been absolutely wonderful. I'm so blessed to have talked with you today, and so many people are going to benefit from hearing this information.
Great. Thank you so much, Gretchen. It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you.